This blueprint aligns the South Dakota State Standards to a high school Algebra 1 course. In the 3 years prior to Algebra 1, students have already begun their study of algebraic concepts. Students have investigated variables and expressions, they've solved equations, constructed and analyzed tables, they've used equations and graphs to describe relationships between quantities, and studied linear equations and systems of linear equations graphically. The fundamental purpose of this course is to formalize and extend the mathematics that students learned in the middle grades. Because it is built on the middle grade standards, this is a more ambitious version of Algebra 1 than has generally been offered. The instructional focus is deepen and extend understanding of linear and exponential relationships by contrasting them with each other and by applying linear models to data that exhibit a linear trend. And students engage in methods for analyzing, solving, and using quadratic functions. The mathematical practice standards apply throughout Algebra 1, and together with the content standards prescribe that students experience math as a coherent, useful, and logical subject that makes use of their ability to make sense of problem situations. For this blueprint, we've identified 5 instructional focus areas which should be addressed in a high school Algebra 1 course. Instructional focus number 1 is representing functional relationships. Here students develop understanding of functional relationships and they solve one-variable equations and inequalities. Instructional focus number 2 is linear and exponential relationships. Here students represent linear functions and inequalities, they work with systems of linear equations, they represent exponential functions, and they construct and compare linear and exponential functions. Instructional focus number 3 is summarize and interpret data. Instructional focus number 4 is expressions and equations. Here students interpret the structure and write expressions in equivalent forms to solve problems. They perform arithmetic operations on polynomials. They create equations that describe numbers or relationships, and they solve equations and inequalities in one variable. Instructional focus number 5 is quadratic functions and modeling. Here students use properties of rational and irrational numbers. They interpret functions that arise in application in terms of a context. They analyze functions using different representations. They build a function that models a relationship between two quantities. And finally, they construct and compare linear, quadratic, and exponential models to solve problems. If you take a look at the Algebra 1 page, you'll see each of the instructional focus areas displayed. Click on the image under each one for more details. Here you'll find an overview of the instructional focus. As you scroll down the page, you'll see a list of essential questions as well as common misconceptions. And further down the page is a button that links to lessons and assessments that you can use to address the instructional focus. This area will continue to grow as we add new materials. One other area to highlight is the Year at a Glance page. From the main page, you'll see a link below the title. This page will provide you with suggestions on how many days to spend on each part and a suggested sequence. Keep in mind, these are just suggestions to serve as a guide.